What is going on, guys? Gaston right here once again, and today we're going to be talking about the A7IV, a camera that a lot of people are really excited, including myself, because the A7 III, the camera that is filming me right now, has been really great to us. So all the information that we know, a little bit about the rumors, coming up. Now, when you think about it, the A7 III is the best bang for your buck. It features great video features and also great photography specs. It also is packed with one of the best autofocus out there, and it was one of the first cameras to receive animal autofocus via firmware update. So the A7 III is actually a great camera today, sporting 4K video recording. So how can Sony make this camera a better camera with a version 4? And why don't we start talking about the sensor? Now, if you think about it, the A7 III has the same sensor since version 1. Now we're going on version 4. So 24 megapixel. Now, hear me out. The APS-C line, the A6600 or the A6400 or any of the A6000, they sport a 24 megapixel sensor. Now, the A7 III is the camera that kind of like comes right after those cameras, kind of like your upgrade to full frame. And then you have the R line, that is the R3 and the R4, the R3 with a 42 megapixel sensor and the R4 with a 61 megapixel sensor. Then you have the A9 II with a 24 megapixel sensor, but that camera is like a monster on its own. Now, when you think about upgrading to this camera, the A7 IV should give us a little bit more for our money. You know, we have 24 in the APS-C line, and I think that 30 or 32 megapixel sensor for the version 4 would actually be ideal, because that would actually allow us to get into the higher resolution realm without actually having to spend the money for the R version. So 32 megapixel sensor, hopefully that's what we're gonna see. We'll see. Now, A7 III sports a 5-stop image stabilization, and let's be honest, the stabilization of the A7 III, it's okay, you know, it does the job. It's not as good as other cameras out there like Panasonic, for example, but now the A7 IV is actually gonna sport a 5.5 stops in-body image stabilization. Half a stop of image stabilization should not be noticeable, but again, anything in the in-body image stabilization that's better than before is always welcome. So 5.5, just like the other camera, coming to the A7 IV. Now, we definitely are gonna see a much more improved version of the processor of this camera, and that is going to enable this camera to also bring some additional features, like, for example, enhanced dynamic range. And I say enhanced because most likely it's gonna happen digitally than actually physical stops of dynamic range. Now, the A7 III sports a 15 stop of dynamic range, and chances are that the A7 IV is also going to have the same 15 stop of dynamic range. Now, with a new sensor and with a new processor, that may be improved. Now, the A7 IV is going to feature more weather sealing, and that's something that's always welcome, and it's going to put this body more in line with the A7R4 or the A9 II, for example. One thing for sure is that we're gonna see in this version the body of the A9 and 7R4. So what I mean by that is that we're gonna have the deeper grip, we're gonna have the bigger button, much clicker. Also, we're gonna have the new joystick that I also enjoy very much in my 7R4. So all these tiny little details can be actually enough for some photographer and an excuse to upgrade their gear. Now, one of the things that I use a lot is real-time tracking, and this is exactly something that the A7 III cannot offer. Now, the A7 IV is gonna fix that, because we're gonna have real-time tracking in the A7 IV, and now this puts this camera in line with all the cameras out there. You know, we have real tracking with the A6600, a much cheaper camera, and we don't have it in the A7 III. So real-time tracking coming to the A7 IV, a very much welcome feature, and perhaps a lot of people are going to upgrade just because of that. Now, one of the things that I wish it was rumored to actually be better is the burst rate. So the A7 III can shoot up to 10 frames per second, and we're going to get exactly the same on the A7 IV. Now, there are cameras like the A6600, and remember before I mentioned that this camera can do some things a little bit better, does 11 frames per second. I mean, it's not a deal breaker, 10 or 11 frames per second, but it would have been nice to have a little bit of a bump right there. Now, we don't have anything higher in the A7R4, so I mean, I don't complain. 10 frames per second, I take that. But one of the things that most likely we're gonna see is a much more improved tracking capability and autofocus performance. The A7 III was one of the first cameras to actually implement eye autofocus and animal autofocus via firmware. And to be honest with you, it works flawlessly. And I don't think the need for upgrading this camera just because of that. Now, in the A7 IV, we may see a slight version of the same system, but would that be actually enough for someone to actually upgrade? Perhaps not. Pixel shift, do you use it? I personally don't use it, and if you use it, drop your comments down below. But pixel shift technology is coming to the A7 IV, and basically what it is, it allows you to generate an image of higher resolution using the same sensor. And the way it works, it takes 4 pictures and then it shifts the pixels to create an image of higher resolution. Now, it's something that you use. Maybe if you use it, you're gonna be super happy about that. I don't use it, but it's something that we have also in the much more expensive camera. So having higher end features and less expensive camera is always a good deal. Now let's talk a little bit about video specs, because the A7 III is a camera that has been very popular among content creators. You know, this camera can give you 4K video recording up to 30p and also gives you slow motion in HD. So will we see 60p at 4K in the A7 IV, like a lot of people are rumoring out there? What do you think, Noboru?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so neither. I don't think so neither, because 60p, we don't have it in the much more expensive camera, and for Sony to actually bring 60p in this camera may not be very smart, and people will not buy the much more expensive versions. Now, one of the things that I think we may see, but again, it's kind of like the same, you know, in the same boat. Some people are saying that we're gonna see 10-bit recording in the A7 IV. While the other cameras cannot do 10-bit, it actually makes sense to bring it here, because that could actually lead for the future versions of the other cameras to actually have 60p 10-bit, and then we'll put this camera, you know, a step lower. But who knows? 60p definitely I don't think is coming. 10-bit possibly. Now this rumor talks about PC Sync being actually incorporated to the A7 IV, and to be honest with you, I don't think who is actually excited about this one. At least I'm missing something, you know, with remote triggers. Who needs PC Sync, you know, capabilities to actually connect cables? We're trying to stay away from cables and stuff like that, but some of the other higher end cameras have PC Sync, so I guess if they put it here, I mean, to me, it just doesn't matter, but apparently we're gonna see PC Sync port in the A7 IV. Now I'm really pumped about this one, because the A7 III has to have the worst EVF and the worst screen of all mirrorless full frame cameras out there, probably released in the last 2 to 3 years. So what we have right now in the A7 III, so we have the screen is 921.6K dots and the EVF is 2.36 million dots. Now we're gonna be upgraded to the same things that we have on the A7 IV, which is actually a screen at 1.44 megapixel and the EVF that is 5.76 megapixel. Finally, we're gonna get a little bit of quality. And guess what? There are some cameras that even have even higher EVFs and even higher screens. So for Sony to upgrade it for the first time, thank you so much, because that screen that we have right now in the Sony A7 III is really, really bad. Now for a full frame camera such as the A7 III, you know, with incredible capability, not to have a lock release button, it's actually a bummer and a cripple for no reason. So for the first time, we're gonna have in the A7 IV a lock release button, and finally we're gonna put this camera in line with the other bigger and much more expensive players like the S7R. So now this one is a really good setting to have in the A7 IV, and it's coming, and actually I never pay attention to the setting until I started using it, and it's called load and save settings. So basically what it is, it allows you to save all the settings of your current camera. Let's say this camera that's filming me right now, we have photography settings, we have low light situation shooting settings, we have video settings, we have slow motion settings, all the settings of the camera, the brightness of the screen, everything. So what it allows you to do is save it onto the SD card, and then pop the SD card into the new camera, load the setting, and boom. All the settings that you spend like minutes or hours to configure in this camera, you can do it within seconds in the new camera. So that one is a really good one to have. Digital audio interface. In the A7 III, of course, we don't have digital audio interface, but in the A7 IV, we're gonna have digital audio interface. And this is something that we're gonna find in the much more expensive camera. So being able to have that is actually gonna be very much welcome. Now, one of the features that I really enjoy knowing that it's going to happen in the A7 IV is that now we're going to have dual UHS 2 SD card, much faster. Now in the A7 III we have version 1 and version 2, which kind of like, you know, you have to decide where you want to record. So having dual UHS 2 SD card, it is going to be awesome. Now this new feature coming to the A7 IV could potentially be one of the most important features for a lot of content creators out there. And it talks about, for the first time, Sony bringing it to the full frame line, some sort of articulator or flip screen. At first I was like, I don't think they're gonna do it in the lower end full frame camera. Probably should have done in the A7R4 if they were ready for that. But when you think about what they have done with the A6000 line, they brought it first in the A6400, and then all the cameras carried on like the A6600, which happens to be the most expensive camera of the A6000 line. So if they actually bring that on the A7 IV, that is actually going to be killer, especially if for the first time they also bring touch screen capability like it's being rumored to happen. So we'll see what happens, but it's time for Sony to give us those capabilities in this camera so we can be much more in line with Panasonic, Olympus, Canon, Nikon, and everyone else. I think that Sony, it's time to bring it. Connectivity, let's talk about that because that is very important. Not a lot of people talk about that. So in this version of the A7 IV, we are going to have the latest versions of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and NFC. It's going to give us faster data transfer, which is much welcome to transfer photos from the camera to your phone and also improve the overall experience of the app and the camera. Hopefully they're just going to redo it because the app is actually really bad and not one of the best. So guys, this is it for today. I hope you had enjoyed this video, and if you like the content, give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button for more content like this one, and until then, you know it. See you later.